My name is Maurice Harker. I am a licensed professional counselor by licensure. I work with married couples who are struggling. I work with individuals who are trying to recover from personal frustrations, anywhere from just lack of self-discipline, but mostly to addictions. Most of the people I work with have a comorbid condition, which means it just happens at the same time of depression. And sadness, disappointment, frustration, there's lots of different words for it. I rarely use the word depression when I'm working with people because it's too convoluted. I try to isolate it more to the actual emotion they're experiencing regularly. Most people experience like 5 to 10 emotions at a time. And so you can only have one thought at a time, but you can have lots of feelings at a time. And so what I'm going to talk about today is, for simplistic terms, dealing with disappointment and what the person goes through. I've learned that people handle it better if they understand it better. It's kind of like women going through pregnancy. If they know why their body's doing what it's doing, if they know where the pain's coming from, why it's there, it's more tolerable. And so you can't get rid of the pain of pregnancy, but you can't get rid of the pain of life sometimes. There's a difference between depression and grief. Depression is usually a genetic condition. I usually use the term to refer to people who are sad for no reason. They are experiencing a gray cloud that follows them around, but if you take a look at their life, their degree of sadness does not match their life experience. It's a little too excessive. But I meet plenty of people whose sadness matches their unfortunate life experiences. If you had a lot of life plans and you get hit by a car and your body's not working correctly, you should have some sadness about that. If you were growing up hoping to raise a family as a young woman, and either you find out you are infertile and can't have babies, if you don't find marriage or the committed relationship you want, then there's disappointment there. And then men have their own huge list of reasons to be disappointed. Wow, this is not the way I thought it was going to be, quite frequently around their ability to make as much money as they wanted to make, or they just keep doing stupid things that they can't stop themselves from doing. Okay, for most of the history of psychology, the theorists were men. One of the first respected female theorists was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she's the one who came up with the grief cycle. She says it starts with denial. Denial, it sounds like this. This can't be happening to me. Things were supposed to be better than this. I can't believe this is so horrible. It was originally designed to be for death, the experience of death. I can't believe this person's died. But if you look at like newlyweds, I can't believe marriage isn't as good as I thought it was going to be. Men in business, I can't believe that I'm not making as much money as I wanted to, etc., etc. Okay? The next stage is bargaining. Bargaining is the phase that Kubler-Ross refers to as the I could have done more, I should have done more, I could have done better, something should have been different. What if I had done, what if I had done, what if I had done? And so it's a lot of rethinking and rethinking and rethinking. So I often refer to that as the thinking stage. And there's more than one ways to think about things. Okay? In her original paradigm, you went from there to anger. But why would you become angry? Is because your thinking and thinking and thinking isn't getting you anywhere. Now, there's different ways to think about things. So this is my addition to the grief cycle. There's something called fretting. Fretting is a form of thinking where you're not getting anywhere. Okay? You go around and around and around in circles and you're not getting anywhere. This is very uninspired thinking. A lot of people stay fretters when I'm diagnosing somebody. I can tell where their psychology's at right now by if they're fretting. That actually tells me a little bit about them, that they are trying to avoid anger. They're not the angry type. I'm more of a thinker than I'm an angry type. But when you find no solution after a while, and you see this in small occasions like parenting, I'm trying to figure out how to raise this kid right. I'm trying to figure out how to raise this kid. And they're just bargaining, and they can even go to the denial. It can't be this hard. This kid can't be this difficult. It can't be this. My parents, it was easy for them. I don't know what's wrong. So there's a denial stage there too, bargaining. And then you know what? It ain't working. Anger. Okay? Now people tend to split themselves into two personality groups when it comes to the emotions of disappointment. Some tend to spend more time in the next stage, which is sadness, while others spend more time being angry. And then, if they keep moving forward, they can get to something called resigned. Now this is where you're going to see one of the biggest splits between stereotypical men and stereotypical women. This is where men say, you know what, it didn't work out, it's too bad, how sad for all of us, let's get off of the wagon, get out of the cycle, and let's just be resigned, okay? Life sucks, move on, get over it. And because so many men say that, a lot of women feel broken if they don't stay resigned, okay? But let me give you an example on a personal level of how this women can contribute something that's very painful but very powerful at the same time. You see, in my own situation, we've dealt with infertility since we got married. No birth control for 20 years. Okay? After years of trying different things, I became resigned. You know what? That's just how it's going to be. Let's plan your life. Your adopted son is going to be old enough to move out when I'm 40. Empty house. You can do a lot with an empty house. Okay? Came home one day, and my wife had gotten off course. Okay? And she did something that I call denial of reality. The word we use for it sometimes is called hope. And she says, I was thinking. You know, men do this sometimes too with business type stuff or other projects. So, I've got an idea. You know, the last one didn't work. Thomas Edison. Okay? All sorts of people who everyone else is saying, let's stay resigned to live the way we live, until someone has a denial of reality. Maybe there's a way to create a source of light without fire. Okay? Maybe there's a way to build a building that's taller than it is wide without it falling over. Maybe there's a way we can add a child to our family. Well, no. Now, why do we resist this? Because it hurts if it doesn't work. So we go into bargaining again, thinking again, and fretting. But there's another form of thinking that can be an inspired form of thinking. Inspired thinking is what I call pondering. Now most people, if you take a second and you ask them just to feel the difference, how does fretting feel compared to pondering? Fretting decreases the likelihood of being inspired by brilliant ideas, and pondering increases the likelihood of being inspired by great ideas. But let's talk for a second about people who get stuck here in this unpleasant experience of fretting that can get them unable to get out of it, which can grow increasingly negative emotions that are mixed in. Some will call it depression, but it has lots of feelings associated with it. There's anger in it, there's sadness in it, and you feel stuck. You see, along the way, one analogy for the way the brain works with all its neurological pathways is that it's a pathway as you go thinking. And you're thinking along, you're walking along, and there's these tripwires in this forest connected with some buckets with chemicals. And if you walk down a certain thought path, it will trigger buckets of chemicals that will spill into the brain, causing an emotional and physiological reaction. For most people, the most obvious experience with this is when you see a police officer in your rearview mirror with his lights on while driving down the highway or the freeway. The average driver tends to have a significant, unignorable chemical reaction called panic or freaking out. Okay? What's interesting to observe about that experience is that we all think it's an automatic experience, but if you look at it more scientifically, if there's someone in the car with you from a third world country like Africa who's never seen a car, road, or cop in their whole life, they're not going to have the same reaction. Why? Because they don't have a connection between the idea of getting in trouble with the lights on the cop car. And so what this tells us is not actually the cop that causes the chemical or adrenaline reaction. It's the meaning of the cop, the idea of the cop, or the thought of the cop. And so sometimes when we're going through our day, certain thoughts will flash into the mind. Okay? So we could have lots of ideas bouncing through our heads that we're not even aware of at a high speed. And if those are running through these neurological paths, and one of those paths has connected to it something like seeing a cop in the rearview mirror, but maybe in this case it's more of a depressing thought, like you're never going to make enough money, or life's going to suck forever, too bad you're ugly and fat. There's just a lot of different thoughts that can just flash through the mind, thus causing a chemical reaction. And our body says, I felt this before. Oh yeah, that one time when someone called me names in elementary school. That memory flashes into the brain, spilling more chemical in the bloodstream, thus intensifying the feeling. Well, now I'm even more depressed. Which brings us back to the filing cabinet for a whole other conversation or remembrance of something depressing. Well, you've tried to lose weight before and that didn't work. So that bumps in the head, etc., etc., etc. This spin has been measured to be as fast as 4 times per second, going completely around and around and around and around. But most of us are trying to pay so close attention to our thoughts that we don't even notice what the chemicals are doing in our brains. And what is happening with the chemicals in the brain, you see, we function at our best in the frontal lobe part of our brain. And many good things happen here, including pondering or meditating. As these chemicals that I was just describing continue to pour into the brain is starting to transfer its energy out of its frontal lobe and more towards the middle brain or the animal brain or the survival brain. And people go into a fight, flight, or freeze mode, where they either start fighting with people, fighting the situation, or running away from it. People become isolated. I'm just not someone who likes conflict, so they never problem solve. They freeze. But between these zones is when the fretting starts to occur, and fretting, because it has no answers, there's no solutions, the chemicals continue to get worse, and the person just moves closer and closer to what we call the give up moment. When a person has the experience of hope, and they go, maybe, what if? Okay, that's actually quite a pleasant chemical experience. Okay, then they launch into the bargaining or thinking zone. If the rut your brain goes through is more likely to be a fretting brain than it is a pondering brain, you got some work to do. You got to put a little alarm system about right there that says, now, fork in the road here, are you going to fret about it or are you going to ponder about it? Well, I don't want to be angry and I don't really trust a miracle, so I'm just going to fret. I got lots of people that go, you don't understand, Maurice, I need to keep thinking about this until I find a solution. And we're going to go 1,000,000 miles per hour. And if inspiration doesn't come, then I'll find it myself. They go around, 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 and as they're going around, there's the chemical buckets right there, and they trip it every time they go around, which increases the velocity of the spin until they finally crash, and then they'll go to anger, then they'll go to sadness, then maybe they'll go into a healthy resignation. There's more than one. There's, the unhealthy resignation. And then there's healthy resignation. All right, a tsunami just hit us. There's lots of things broken. Let's go find some bricks and sticks and let's start building. That's a healthy resignation. And then you have hope again. Anyway, so you don't get off the wheel. You're happier, going back to the comparison to pregnancy. If you know what you're experiencing, it's not as painful. And healthy people cycle through all 5. And we call it emotional constipation if you're stuck in any certain one. Imagine a person who's stuck in denial of reality. Hope. Everything's going to be great. Everything's fine. Okay? They never sufficiently think it through. They never prep. They're just la 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 la. Okay? Pollyanna-ish. There are those who get stuck on thinking. There are those who get stuck on anger. There are those who get stuck on sad. Those who get stuck on resigned. None of those are healthy. The healthiest thing to do is when you're resigned, start looking for hope. That's how you avoid getting stuck in depression.